Hello, and welcome to another episode of Do What You Love, where we unlock your creative life through conversations with interesting people. And I am so excited about this episode because I'm introducing you to my friend Terrance P. Elmore. He is an author, podcaster, he is a father, he is a creative, he is a very inspiring human, and I always really appreciate all of our conversations around creativity and the creative process, and especially around the writing process. So he has self-published 3 books. His new book is coming out very soon. It's in pre-order right now, and it's called Pain is Not Our Only Paintbrush, which I love that title. So we're going to talk all things writing, creativity, and self-publishing. So if you are interested in potentially writing a book and self-publishing, we're going to dive into that a little bit too. So Terrance, so awesome to see you as always.
Hey, thank you for having me, Kate.
I always enjoy our conversations. We are so in my book, Do What You Love, I talk about creative friends and why they're so important in our lives because we have to be around people that are creating, that are putting work out into the world because know they know and understand kind of what it takes and kind of the
Right.
courage that it takes to put things out into the world. And so you are one of my creative friends, and I so appreciate that you have the courage to put your work out into the world because you create really beautiful work.
Oh, thank you.
So I have one of your books. I got love letters. And you've self-published 3 poetry books, and your next one is coming out. When is it actually coming out into the world? I know it's in pre-order right now.
Okay, so I'm shooting for October 5th. Still waiting on to get some copies and see if they look good, see if I like them. If not, worst case scenario, it'll still be in October, but probably a couple of days later.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm excited to get it. And this is your third. So you've written 3 books of poetry.
Yes.
And what inspires you to write poetry? I find it to be such an interesting, it's so different than just regular writing, right? Like there's so much emotion around it. There's so much I don't know. I just feel like it to me it was not it's not an easy thing to write, but it's definitely something that I love to do. I don't necessarily think my poems are wonderful by any means,
They
but it's
are,
fun
yeah.
to write. So what inspires you? Like how do you write?
A lot of different things. I can be inspired from a conversation because a lot of my poems lately have been motivational or inspirational. Well, at least the ones I share a lot. So it could just be a conversation. It could be something that I think about, something I see on TV, even a song. I just pull it from everywhere. When it comes to poetry, it's more freedom than just regular writing to me because it's all these different rules you have with regular writing that you don't necessarily have to pay attention to when you do poetry. You just open your heart and go.
I feel okay, so I don't want to get down the rabbit hole of rules because I know that poetry is kind of it is kind of what you feel and like
Mhm.
what makes sense to you. In fact, I sent a poem to I took this poetry workshop, and one of the things that we were able to do is send a poem to one of the editors, and they edited it. And when they did that, she she edited the grammar, like some of like, "Oh, well, I would prefer to put periods," or I would put and it was so funny because right before I published my book, do you remember I
Yeah.
said, "Hey, I need to talk to you because my poem doesn't have punctuation," like, until the very end, and I was very intentional about the very end having the period because it was like done, it was final, it was and then the rest of it, when I started playing around with more periods and punctuation, I was like, "It doesn't fit, it doesn't work, it didn't feel right to me." But then when I had some editor look at the work and they started playing around punctuation, I think then I started getting tripped up in that. So when you're writing poetry, are you just kind of like, "Hey, I'm more it's more for you about the idea of just getting the essence of the poem out versus the punctuation, the grammar, that kind of thing?"
For the most part, it depends. Like if I'm writing something with particular amount of lines or something like that, that has a because there are a set of rules. Like if I'm writing a haiku, of course, there's a set of rules with that. If I'm writing like an elf shin or something like that, there are a set of rules. But as far as like trying to pay attention to punctuation, the main thing you want to do is just get your thoughts out. Like if you have a thought about a poem, don't worry about that. You can come back later, and if you want to add periods and commas, you can, but as long as it flows and makes sense, and when you break them down into lines, it actually makes the poem flow. So like the one you sent to me, the period at the end, it was perfect because it went with your poem, like line by line, line by line, and then the poem was the end, the point, the period was the punctuation. It was like, I'm done. That was like the final stamp, so it worked. You just have to kind of play with it and see what works for your poems.
Yeah. And I feel like becoming a better writer also means being really intentional reader. So the more
Mhm.
poetry that you read, I feel like it's almost like you get used to it. There's some poems that I find are so interesting. They're written in a way that it feels, I don't know, like sometimes it's written like in a circle. It can be
Yeah.
written like all across the page. Sometimes it's all the way to the left. Sometimes it's all the way to the right. And then it makes me wonder, well, what was this person thinking? Like, why does that feel right to them? And then sometimes you read a poem and it's almost like, yes, this just works. Like, what do you feel? I think writing, I almost feel like there's no such thing. Well, there is a such thing as good or bad writing, but it's almost like it's writing that makes you feel something and it
Right.
resonates with people. So what do you feel like is there some easy way to, I guess there's not an easy way, but how do you when you're when you're doing work, when you're sitting down to write, how are you trying to get not only the emotions out, but then also in this idea of how can I create something that really resonates with the reader, that really resonates with somebody that would find my work?
I guess because I'm doing a lot of thinking all the time, and I've had like tons of conversations with people, friends, family members, my wife, my strangers, co-workers. I mean, you'd be surprised about how many people that I've had conversations with that I don't know, and they just felt comfortable talking to me. And so when I'm writing, especially like motivational, inspirational stuff, I'm thinking like, if I were in this scenario, how would this speak to me, and how would it give me a sense of light and a sense of hope?
Mm. So what does your writing process look like with your poems? I know when I reached out to you one time to ask how your book was going, you said, "Oh, I feel like I need to change some of the poems." So how do you write and then take a step back and then come back to your work and decide how to kind of change it?
Well, if I'm feeling overwhelmed about something, I just, like you said, I just put it down and try to forget about it. Don't worry about it, and just when it feels right, when it comes back to me, it will. But I don't try to put too much pressure on myself, because I've noticed that if I'm trying to do a poem a certain kind of way, if I'm trying to put a certain kind of style to it, if I keep at it and it doesn't feel how I want it to feel, I'll get frustrated. And then it just turns into just me staring at my either my phone or my pad, whatever I'm using to write it out. And so by putting it down and stepping away, and it may be the next day, it may be the next week, or I've had times where it's been a couple of weeks, but stepping down and getting away from it, it really helps, because like I said before, I find inspiration in a lot of different things. So in that time period in between when I'm trying to write something and just, taking a breather, I'm also taking in some different points of inspiration and motivation.
Do you believe in writer's block?
Yes and no. I think we I think we experience writer's block, but it's not really a block per se. I think it's more or less it's a stopping point to what we're trying to get across, or the idea we're trying to get across, because I think if we were to refocus our writing to something else, we could do it without a problem. I just think it's for that particular thing. I don't think it's a real block. I just think it's kind of like a stopping point. Like I don't think we're blocked totally, but we may have reached a point where it's like our brain is like, it's more than what you're trying to say right now. It's more than what you're trying to write right now. So you need to probably take a little break and then come back to it. But I don't know. I don't really believe in writer's block.
I feel like it's so much more about perfectionism. I feel like when
Yeah.
if people say I have writer's block, it's not necessarily a block, it's more of this idea that we wanna sit down and create perfect work, that we wanna whatever we
Oh
create, we
yeah.
think that we
Yeah.
can sit down and write a masterpiece, and that is just not what happens, and so we stop ourselves from writing because we think we don't know what the next sentence is gonna be or the next part of the story, but only by sitting down and actually writing every single day or whatever your writing practice looks like, I think that really stops people, right? We get in this phase of, "Oh my gosh." And I think this is kind of applied to any type of creative work, anything that we're creating, because I find myself doing that even with some of the videos that I wanna create. It's like,
Yeah.
we wanna know, "Oh, is this the video? Is this the right topic? Is this the way in which I should share the topic?" And then you kind of question yourself and you think about it over and over and you're like, "Maybe I should try this instead." Or instead of just saying, "Okay, I'm gonna write this, I'm gonna create this, I'm gonna put it out, see what happens, see what resonates," and then you can create the next thing and then the next thing, and only by doing that can we get better. But I feel like it's perfectionism is so stifling to so many
Yeah.
people.
It
So
is
how
like
do you deal with perfectionism?
I just I mean, I know that it's so not something that we can obtain. So I just remind myself that and just do it. Like it's not going to be perfect. Like the first time I started my podcast, that very first episode, I did so many edits. I re-recorded it, and then after a while, I was just like, just put it out there because it's never going to be to my full standards. But the point is, as long as you put like some real good effort into it and it reaches somebody and inspires somebody, like whatever you're doing, if it's writing, podcasting, or whatever, that's the main point. And so we'll never obtain perfection, but we could at least try to make it, professional looking and polished. And don't be so hung up on how it looks. Even with that, sometimes it's not going to come out as pretty or as perfect as we want, and that's fine. But as long as you're getting it out there and people see it, and then you can build over time and get better and better, but you're never going to get better if you don't start. You're just going to keep second guessing yourself and pushing off and pushing off. And then it's like, okay, well, this idea is old. I don't want to do this anymore. And then you keep making excuses.
Yeah. Oh, we're good at excuses. We're good at making excuses. People are just good at that because we convince ourselves that the excuse is good. Like it
Right.
makes sense. And really that's all that it is. But for anybody that is listening that is interested in writing a book that really wants to share more of their work, we have to remember that everyone goes through this, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's so interesting when you hear some of the biggest creators and they talk about, oh my gosh, when I post something or when something is shared and how sometimes they still get nervous because anytime you're putting something out into the world, it's your ideas, it's how you're feeling, it's your perspective.
Right.
And that means that some people are not going to agree with it and that can be uncomfortable for some. And so we have to get much better at that, not only the perfectionism, but also just the critics and knowing that, okay, there's going to be people that love your work and there's going to be people that don't love your work. And
Right.
good, good on both sides. Like you
Yeah.
get to continue to create and keep going. So you have written, this is your third poetry book. And what was it like the first time you published versus the third? So, like, the first time, like, what were some of those feelings that you had to get over to actually put a book out into the world?
Uh, well, the very first time I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to get the formatting done. I didn't know how people would receive it. And so it was all of this like, I don't know, but I just felt like I needed to do it. And it was a lot of mistakes I made along the way as far as trying to get the book laid out how I wanted to. And now I know how to get things done. And even this time, I wanted my book to have a different feel on the inside. So I reached out to somebody to do the layout. So this book has actual color and stuff on the inside. My other book didn't have all that. So I guess you could say it evolved a lot since the first time because I wanted to bring like an experience to the book because the cover is dark. And so I wanted the inside to be full of life and I wanted to kind of jump off the pages.
So I love that you said you didn't know how to do it, and then you figured it out because it's super
Yeah.
easy to figure out, right? Like, we can all figure out there's somebody that has done exactly what you wanna do, and there's somebody out there that can support and help you, and so when we have those ideas of, "Oh, I don't know how to," well, we can ask ourselves, "Okay, who can help me? Who can I reach out to kinda help in that process?" And then and then it was almost like there's always gonna be some kinda challenge, right? So you went
Yeah.
from, "Oh, I don't know how to do the layout and design," to now you're more focused on, "Okay, what's the feeling of the book? What's the essence? What does the cover look like? What's the design?" There's so much that goes into the publishing process. So for somebody that is curious a little bit about maybe some of the mistakes that you made because they are going to be self-publishing, what would you share with somebody who is going to self-publish, and you make sure that they don't do some of the mistakes that you might have made in the beginning?
Okay. The main thing is when I uploaded my manuscript, I was using Microsoft Word instead of PDF. And when you use Microsoft Word, it moves everything all over the pages. So it was things on
Oh,
the third page that shouldn't have been there. Everything was all jumbled up. And I took a long time trying to figure out how to make everything neat, and it still wasn't neat enough. And I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but my mother self published before me. And I just asked her after all of this time trying, and she was like, "Well, did you upload it in PDF?" I was like, "No." And she was like, "Yeah, you have to do that to keep everything from moving." And it was just that simple. And I put it in PDF, uploaded, everything was just how I did it. So make sure your formatting matches and whatever platform you're using, make sure that it it goes like double check your work, make sure everything and reach out to somebody. Somebody, like you said, somebody knows how to do this, somebody has more experience, somebody can tell you how to do it. But the biggest thing is make sure your formatting is correct, whatever the software calls for, make sure you're using it.
yeah, oh my gosh. That it's all the little things. It's all the
Yeah,
little things that when you get into it. This is why it's so interesting, to learn the processes, because there are so many things that you don't think about, like when learning the whole publishing world and how to structure things, how you have to there's so much. And publishing, self-publishing and having a publisher are different things, but there's so much that goes behind it. Like, I never thought about, do you have your page numbers on the lower right or in the middle or on the
yeah,
left? And like, what does the font look like, and what is the size of the font? Like, it's all of those things that you don't really pay attention to. And now that I've published a book, now it's horrible because now I can't unsee it. So now every time I read a book, I'm like looking for those things,
right.
like those minor little things. I was like, oh, that was an interesting choice. I wonder why they decided to do that. And so I just think it's so interesting what people learn when they are self-publishing, because that is a whole
Yeah.
different outcome. So tell us about the new book, and how are these poems different than the poems in your two previous books?
So my first book was well, first two books were dedicated towards love. And so this book, it started off with me. I was like, I need to kind of have something for guys to kind of because when you talk about love, it's not really something guys really talk about. So I wanted to have like something more dedicated to us per se, which my books are for everybody, but um it was before the pandemic, and then when George Floyd was murdered, it kind of my poems kind of changed, and then my book became like this, I guess, open journal of like raw emotions. And then I thought about it. I was like, I need to make my poems like positive and have some sort of ray of hope. And so they changed into like positive outlooks. I wanted it to be something to be like educational and something that could inspire everybody. So I wanted to do some black stories from a black man that anybody could appreciate. And I wanted it to be like a ray of hope because I noticed that our stories, the ones that were full of trauma and pain, were like very popular. And so that's where the title came from. Like, pain is not our only paintbrush. And so it's like a beautiful canvas of different stories, the inspirational stories about life, happiness, love, and hope.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Do you have a particular poem that speaks to you the most?
It was a long process. I think all of them kind of do. If I had to say one, probably I don't know. All of them kind of do because this honestly, this is the only book that's taken this long for me to get out because I kind of started it at the beginning of 2020, so to speak, and then it evolved so many different times. And I've even talked about it. Like the first time I was on your show, I talked about it, and I'm just now finishing. So all of them are pretty special to me. I can honestly say that. Like out of all my poems and things, like this project is just the most special to me, like how the pages look, the feel of the book. So yeah, I say all of them.
How do you that's a cop out answer. Come on, Terrence.
But it's true.
What how do you know when a poem is complete?
Honest answer is you never know because anybody can tell you if you write a poem, no matter how many years pass, you look at that poem and you read it, you be like, I could have said this here, or I could have said this differently. So I don't think it's really complete. It's at the point where you tell yourself, I'm not going to touch this anymore. That's it. Because if I'm telling you, if you keep looking at a poem, because I've done it a lot, and it's like, nah, I don't need to say that. And I've even gone back and put something in that I took out because when I write a book, especially when I write a book, I don't just start over. Like I keep a record of what I did the first time, and each time I make changes, I look at what I did before. So I guess a poem is done when you tell yourself it's done. Like I'm stopping right here, no more edits, no more revisions. This is it.
Yeah. I feel like that's the hardest part
Yeah,
when you're writing. It's this especially because as you edit it, you learn, you grow, you keep reading, you're learning new things, and then you go back and you're thinking, "Why did I do that?" Like, there were so many pieces in the book, that I wrote that it was like, "Why did I not expand on this idea?" Or, "Why did I decide to use that analogy?" Or, "Where did that come from?" It was kind of these ideas, but at the time, it made so much sense, and so I
right.
think it's so interesting we have to just say, "Okay, this is why it's so important for us to you create the work and then you move on. You create it and then you do something else." It's just that idea. It always comes back to perfectionism, I feel like. I
Yeah,
feel like that is like the one ooh, that is just this one thing that stops so many people from creating. And the faster that we get over it, the easier that it's going to be to be able to put work out into the world. Well, I'm so excited to get a copy of your new book. Um, we talk a lot, obviously, on this show about living a creative life. So, Terrence, how would you define a creative life?
a creative life to me is doing the things you love without fear of how to be received, without fear of whatever insecurities you may have, and just doing it, just being creative. Don't worry about what anybody says about it. Don't worry about, you know, how anybody's going to laugh or critique or any of that stuff. Just create and just put it out there. Just be confident. It may not be for everybody, but the people who it's for, they're going to appreciate it. And more importantly, you're going to appreciate it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And more important, you're going to appreciate it. Right? Because like
Yeah.
if you have these ideas in your heart, if there's something that you want to get out into the world, those things are not going away. Like you're going to continue to feel like you
Right.
need to share that or do something with it until you actually do. I mean, that is why it's meant for you. Like there's a reason why you feel that way. And so we got to pay attention to that. All right. What is one activity that someone can do in 10 minutes or less to live a more creative and fulfilling life?
I think maybe writing out a gratitude list. Like we have different challenges every day. Some are worse than others, but take the time to write down a gratitude list, the things that you're grateful for, and really take a look at those things and appreciate those things. And I think that'll help us move forward. It's like sometimes we overlook the smallest things, and sometimes we even overlook the big things, but we need to take time to write down and be grateful for what we have. And I think that'll help us, create more different things.
Beautiful. Well, I am grateful for you and our friendship. You are awesome. I always appreciate when I get to chat with you. And I thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you for
And
having me.
tell everyone the best place to connect with you, find you, and of course, get a copy of all of your books, but especially your upcoming book that's in pre-sale right now.
Okay, you could hit my website, thebrownsugarcafe.blog, or you can find me on Instagram, Facebook at the Brown Sugar Cafe, also on TikTok and YouTube. And I do have pre-order available on my website, and my books are available on Amazon. I prefer you get them from me, but they are available on Amazon.
All right. Yes. Get them from the website. Get them from the website. All right, Terrance, you are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you.